So that's what I want us to see as we walk through this chapter. Because I don't believe grace is just a doctrine that we study. It is a life-changing encounter with a King who calls us who are crippled, who are broken, who are forgotten, and who are fearful, and He makes us family. So how does He do that? Well, the first thing I want you to see is that God, through His grace, seeks us. He seeks us. The grace of God reaches out to us. It seeks us. It looks for us. We've already said David has come to a time of great victory. There in verse 1, is there anyone still left of the house of Saul so that I could show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? This is unusual for a king, is it not? He's looking for an enemy. He's looking for a descendant of the one who spent a good portion of his time trying to execute David. Why? Not that so he could eliminate him, but that he might show kindness to him. If you've read on ahead of me, you've noticed that word kindness, that word hesed, it's used 3 times in this chapter. It's given there in verse 1. We've read that. It's also given in verse 3. The kindness, the hesed of God. It also occurs in verse 7. I will surely show you kindness. It's the expression of this affection that is given by God when raised to the highest level. It is a demonstration of the kindness of God that flows directly from His heart and flows toward us. If there ever was a time when David demonstrated that phrase that's so often attached to him, that David was a man after God's own heart, if there was ever a time he was demonstrating that quality of himself, it is here. That he is seeking someone to whom he may bestow grace and mercy and kindness. That is the very motivation that allows God to seek us. He is motivated by His own nature, His own kindness and mercy and grace toward us. That's reflected in the New Testament. I'll give you just a couple of verses here. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 7, it says that in the ages of grace to come, He might show the exceeding riches of His grace in His kindness toward us. That leads to something so many of us misunderstand. You are not saved. Listen to me. You are not saved because you in any way deserve it. You are not saved in any way because you earned it. You are not saved in any way because you worked for it. You are saved by God's grace and His grace alone. The same way that this man in the Old Testament who expected death received the grace and kindness of David. But there's another motivation that's there that's given in that verse. He says, so that I could show him kindness for Jonathan's sake. Now, we all remember Jonathan, right? He was David's all-time best friend. He fit that phrase, a friend closer than a brother. That's who Jonathan was to David. And you might remember back in 1 Samuel that they had made a covenant with one another. Jonathan and David entered into this covenant with one another, and Jonathan asked David something very, very specific. He said, I want you to promise me something. And if you want to go back and read it, it's in 1 Samuel chapter 20, starting at about verse 12. But I want to read it to you because this is the promise that David is fulfilling when he says, for Jonathan's sake. So in 1 Samuel chapter 20, starting in verse 12, he said, if I am still alive, will you not show me the faithfulness? By the way, that's the word hesed. Show me the faithfulness of the Lord, so that I do not die. And you shall never cut off your loyalty, that's also the word hesed, to my house. Not even when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord demand it from the hands of David's enemy. And Jonathan made David vow again because of his love for him, because he loved him as he loved his own life. That's the explanation of 2 Samuel 9. That's why David is asking this question. Is there anyone I can show kindness and mercy and grace, show hesed for Jonathan's sake? It's not for political gain. It is not for obligation. It is to fulfill a covenant that I made long ago. I'm going to keep my promise. That is a promise that we too get to claim. I just told you we're not saved for our own sake. We are saved for Jesus' sake. And just as David extended kindness on behalf of Jonathan's family for a promise that he made, so too God extends grace and mercy to us because of what Jesus did on the cross. That is the reason and the motivation for us receiving grace. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as Christ forgave you. We don't do it for our sake. We do it for His. We don't receive salvation for our own sake. We do it and receive it for His. But then in response to this question, a servant named Ziba is brought in. And David asks again if anyone is left of Saul's house. And this servant, Ziba, replies, there is still a son of Jonathan who is disabled in both feet. That's verse 3. And again, he's referring to Mephibosheth. And to understand the situation, if you wanted to go back, you need to go back toward the beginning of the book, and it's in chapter 4, 2 Samuel, verse 4 of chapter 4. Because when the news of Saul's death and Jonathan's death reached the ears of their household, his nurse picked him up hurriedly and fled. Now, why would they do that? Well, for the obvious reason. Because all of their protection was wrapped up in Saul and Jonathan, and with both of them gone and a new king coming to power, they expected to die. And that's why it says, now Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was disabled in both feet when he was 5 years old. When the news of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, his nurse picked him up and fled. But it happened that in her hurry to flee, he fell and could no longer walk. And his name was Mephibosheth. In one day, he lost his father, he lost his grandfather, and he lost his future. He was left broken, both physically and emotionally. Even though he was born into royalty, the grandson of a king, he was crippled by a fall, left to die. Sound familiar? It should. Because I told you this is not only his story, it's our story. This is our story too. Because spiritually speaking, just like Mephibosheth, we are born into the wrong family. We are born into the fallen line of Adam. and we too are crippled by a fall. Isn't that what Paul said? By one man, sin came into the world. By that one man, death has spread to all. When Adam fell of the wrong family, we all fell, and sin has left us broken and disoriented and far from home, expecting and anticipating death. If you have a good study Bible, it will tell you this. That strange name, Mephibosheth, has a meaning, and it means shame. It means one who scatters disgrace. So here's a young man who should have inherited honor, yet who is now hiding in obscurity. And he fully realizes this, by the way. If you've read ahead again, down in verse 8, he refers to himself as what? As a dead dog. Not just a flea and tick infested, mangy little dog, a dead one at that. He understood that he had no sense of self-worth. He had no reason whatsoever to expect kindness. While his bloodline should have given him an inheritance, a fall left him worthless. And he had now expected death. And you see, that is what is pictured in verse 4. And this is often overlooked, but that same servant, Ziba, tells David that Mephibosheth, he's in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in a certain place. He's in Lo-debar. Now, these names are important. Machir means sold. Lo-debar means no pasture. So here you have this young man, young boy, crippled, hiding in someone else's house, a place that literally means no pasture. Is that not what sin does to us all? It sells us out. It leaves us broken and barren and empty. And any and all of our attempts to find joy and meaning apart from God lead us to the exact same place, to Lo-debar, to no pasture. No matter what you choose, whether it be money or pleasure or relationships or success, without God, they all lead to the same place. No pasture, a place of emptiness and barrenness because we have been sold out because of our sin. But that didn't stop David. In that same verse, in verse 4, he asks a question and he says, "Where is he?" Now that's important. And it's important by understanding what did he not ask. He did not ask, what is his reputation? He did not ask if he was a good man or a bad man. He did not ask if he was worthy or unworthy. He simply wanted to know his location. What does that tell us? What does it reveal to us about grace? It reveals to us that the grace of God is not looking for qualifications. It's looking for people to love. Good, bad, worthy, unworthy, it makes no difference. The grace of God is there for all. And for that reason, verse 5 tells us, then King David sent messengers who brought him from the house. Now, I love that part because he didn't send a letter of inquiry. He didn't wait for Mephibosheth to make the first move. David initiated it. David sends for him. The same is true today. Grace always makes the first move. There are so many people in so many different churches that preach this completely backwards. There are so many churches that teach people how to seek God. You need to start praying enough. You need to start reading your Bible enough. You need to start giving enough. You need to start doing all of these things enough. And if you do them enough, then you're learning how to seek God so that He may be found. That is completely 180 degrees backwards from what should be taught. Why? Because Paul wrote in Romans chapter 3 and verse 11, there is no one who seeks after God. Not one. It is God who seeks after us. In other words, God does exactly as David is reflecting here. He seeks after those to whom He is going to bestow grace.